Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you are watching on YouTube, you can find out more information at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about media and virtual production, driven by your questions. Our second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. Today, we're going to talk about studios. If we had $20,000, what would we build? So we're talking 20 foot by 30 foot by 10-foot ceiling. We had this question come up in an after hours and maybe in office hours, and we kind of fumbled through it, and I thought it'd be a fun subject for a second hour. Tomorrow, we'll have 2 hours of just general discussion. Friday, we're going to talk about second hours. We're going to brainstorm a little bit about what we want to see in our future second hours and who we'd like to try to bring in. December's already shaping up pretty well, but we're gonna start trying to really hit all the cylinders all the time. So Friday we'll be brainstorming about that, and then Saturday is of course the long day. We have education at 8 o'clock. We don't broadcast that; you have to be on Zoom. And then at noon we return to Belfast, back to the Accidental Theatre, where we're gonna do a remote takeover and run a concert. So it should be a lot of fun. So stay tuned for that. All right, let's jump into the questions. Bill, what do we have?
Our first one comes from Rupert McRae. Actually, he has the first 4 or 5. He's been highly rated and highly voted up this morning. And Rupert asked in this one, when Office Hours moves to a new YouTube channel, will all the back cataloged episodes move also? And might that break all the YouTube links that Office Hours has posted in the wild, particularly linked to time-stamped segments in the videos?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So we haven't really fully talked about it, Alex and myself, and who else, ever else is a part of this conversation. But I know that Alex likes to not look too much in the past. And with that said, there's going to be certain segments that I'm going to push to have come over second hours. So I would basically be cutting them, so the second hour would be coming over, but not the first hour part. Anything that does come over, I would guess that we keep the original up in its location, so links won't get broken at all. But yeah, Alex will have to speak to that part.
Yeah, to keep it simple from a search term, if we decided to move everything over, and I'm not saying that we should, I mean, someone would have to commit themselves to doing that if they feel like it's really important to put on the new channel. I don't need it to go over. But my thought would probably start to, at some point when we decided everything's working, is just to move them to all unlisted. So they're not something that you can search for and find, but they don't break any links. So that's probably where we'd go, or we'd move them over and do them unlisted. But I don't want to break any links. I'm pretty sensitive to that. But I don't know if I want them to be I guess what I want to make sure of is, if you're searching for office hours, you end up in the new office hours site. So that's why I'd probably make them all unlisted, is just to not have them something that shows up as a search term. Next question.
Rupert's back with IBC. IBC question. That's a big conference in Amsterdam, and has canceled its in-person event. They say that they will now focus on bringing the content and technology community together via IBC Digital. Who has IBC Digital on their radar?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I do. I'm glad because there was an opportunity. I was going to go to IBC, but I decided to turn it down after the NAB debacle. And so I picking and choosing my shows. I'm still planning on going to CES. I think that's going to actually happen as an in-person show. But I felt that that IBC was a little selfish in not canceling a little bit earlier, especially when there were people that were planning a lot of international travel, and now they're scrambling for their to try and figure out how they're going to recoup the cost of their flights and things like that. It's just going to be a mess. And I know that they have to try and get something in person because that's how their business runs. But I still thought it was a little bit insensitive that they didn't take things a little bit more seriously.
Hope is not a strategy. Go ahead, Rupert.
Jeffrey makes a good point. I've definitely seen reports and posts from people who had either made the trip or maybe were somewhere else, and that was going to be their next stop on the trip, or they've got equipment en route or resources en route, and now that's either having to be, who knows what. So it's a good question there.
They would have had a really good show if they'd spent a year working on a digital version. That's all I'm going to say. Like it's just, I think we all talked about the fact that there probably wasn't going to be any shows that work, and companies that I worked with that were in the know were like, we're not doing anything until CES at the earliest. And they just skipped the whole fall. And they had their specialists look at the trajectories and just said, it's not worth even thinking about it. So there's a lot of companies that did figure that out early But yeah, hope is not a strategy, and I think that they just physical event folks want to get back to it as fast as they can, and yeah, it's and I give CES 50-50. Like, given that it was probably the original super spreader for the virus, that I give it 50-50 that it comes back around. We'll see how it goes. Go ahead, Rupert.
Yeah, talking about CES, I've seen some of the chatter around IBC lead to a couple of polls online about, should CES go ahead? And there's quite a lot of people saying no.
Yeah. So I don't think that I'm not going. and I went every year for, I don't know, over a decade. But it's not, I wouldn't want to be there, even if they had it. Next question.
Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas is right back up with some guidance on how to avoid the so-called Zoom fatigue. Includes turning off self-view video if everyone is blissfully unaware of their appearance, framing, clarity, and so forth. Isn't this likely to diminish meeting quality and actually increase Zoom fatigue?
Go ahead, David.
I think it depends on the meeting that you're in. If I'm in a regular meeting where I'm just a participant, then I don't need to be worried so much and looking at myself. But if I'm a presenter, if I'm on a panel, if I'm a speaker, then I want to make sure that I'm framed correctly and everything else. So I don't ever turn it off, but I do toggle between gallery view where I can find myself easily and speaker view where I'm a little more hidden.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I think it's distracting. Obviously, I like looking at myself as much as possible, but it's for the same reasons that you point out. It's you're constantly checking and rechecking to make sure if you're framed, you look right, your hair is in the right position. I think that is a fatiguing situation, so it's best not to be using a self-view.
Go ahead, Sky.
Carpal tunnel was when you did a lot of repetitive actions on a typewriter, but we didn't call it IBM selectric fatigue. So I say that in the sense of we are doing a continuous repetitive action, and maybe that's the thing. And I guess I'm kind of bucking against Zoom as the cause of this. But as you say, bad video, bad audio, it just takes longer to say. So to have a quality conversation, that's the goal. Now, how do you do that?
Yeah,
and get up and walk around it occasionally.
Go ahead, Charles.
So in some big companies that I've been working at, a lot of the conversation has been lately in the fatigue that comes from recognizing you don't look as good or sound as good as the rest of the people in the team, right? And that's turned into an excuse to turn off your camera, which then starts to diminish the quality of the meeting where you're supposed to have a group meeting the same way that you would in person. So that's an ongoing thing that we've been dealing with, and just trying to help people to step up their game slowly, as we've been doing here with the team here. But it is a human reaction to want to be at the same level as your peers. And when you're not there, that induces stress and fatigue. And how do we deal with that moving forward?
Yeah, I do think that I have been more conscious recently of turning my system down when I'm so I turn off some of the lights, I turn off the backlight, I turn off, I kind of slow my whole system down a bit on some meetings because I realized that I put everybody off. I literally realized that, and I consider myself kind of middle of the road in this group with all of you. I feel like I'm just kind of in the middle of quality, and but I still feel like it overwhelms. I mean, it's a conversation piece at every meeting that I show up at of, because I work with people who are visual, they're doing video production, they're doing whatever. And they're very, to Charles's point, they're very conscious to the fact that their video doesn't look the same. They can see it, they can see that delta, and you can tell that it kind of bothers them, and so I try to pull back a little bit. If I remember, sometimes I just forget to turn the stuff off, but I think that I've paid a little bit of attention to that process. I do think that when people if everybody else turns off their camera, I know I turn mine off. Like, I'm just like, I'm not going to be the only person sitting here with my camera on, so I'll turn mine off and we'll just have a phone call, and it's, so I will say though, in a mixed environment where you have a couple people that look really good on video and a bunch of people that turn their videos off, the hard part for the folks that turn their video off rather than playing hard is that in a corporate environment, they're putting themselves at a disadvantage. Like this is the reality. When if you want to move forward in a corporate environment, you have to show up. And so I think that this is a new process here. It used to be that you had to be at headquarters, you had to work at headquarters, but I think and you had to be around the movers and shakers. But I think that at this point, having a better video and audio definitely gives you an advantage. In every meeting, that people even just listen to you more differently than they listen to everybody else. It's not fair, just is what it is. Next question.
Rupert McRae has his last one in this set. Can an ATEM Mini auto stream on startup and auto restart if it gets interrupted? In other words, used as an unattended streaming appliance? If not, any recommendations for a device that will? Doesn't have to be a switcher, just an encoder will do. Go ahead, Stuart.
Yeah, I'm going to deal with the second part of the question because I'm sure people with more knowledge will deal with the ATEM part. But the Pi, with decaffeine running, you can set it to stream on boot up. I haven't tested it with the HDMI board yet. And if you come back in a couple of weeks after Dennis and I have a lot more time to actually chat and see if we can set up the startup script, it might do it from Video Ninja.
Yeah, I don't think that the ATEM will do that. I think when it restarts, it's going to start back at a base state. So I don't think that you could probably run a script that would tell it to. So if a script saw that, you could probably build something that would say, I don't see something, and now I'm going to do something with it. I do think that most likely the elemental link will do that. I mean, it'll just come back on because the cloud will just tell it, I want more frames. The elemental link, when it comes back on, it just immediately starts sending frames to AWS. Like, I've got frames, and if you have a Media Live event that's asking for that content, it'll just start pulling video out of it automatically. So I think that the thing that the always on would be it would be expensive to leave it always on streaming. I mean, not super expensive, but it would still cost money. But that would be an always on solution. Next question.
Craig McFarland in Boston has an audio question this morning. Is positioning a microphone from below or up and to the side a personal preference, or are there real benefits from each?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Both. It's personal preference and there are benefits. It depends on the type of microphone. If it's side address, like mine is, a large diaphragm, I have it directly underneath and on an arm so that I can get my hands underneath it. That's the personal preference thing. And if you're using like a PR40, an end address dynamic microphone, it works best if you're perpendicular to the microphone in front of it, which puts it in front of your face, so most people put it down a little bit. And the closer it is to you, the better the signal-to-noise ratio, so the less of the room you're going to hear. But you will need a pop filter if you get it in that close, because you're right in the line with the plosives of your microphone. So it's both, and I think also underneath, I like the sound underneath because the resonance that comes out of your nostrils hits the microphone, and if you're above, you lose a lot of that resonance.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
That's amazing. I'm just amazed what Courtney just said because I never thought of that. I've been doing mic technique for a long time, but he is correct. You don't want the microphone in a direct line with your lips or your breath because it just invites plosives and other problems. Down and slightly tilted up for a cardioid. If you have a hypercardioid, maybe you want to work that a little closer. But for the most part, try to keep the mic out of your face. At least that's my personal preference, because if you have it maybe a half a foot away from your mouth, you can work the microphone. If you want to get presence, you can lean into it. You can use it as a musical instrument.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
For me, I move around on a lot of mics, of course, with office hours. I'm using the Heil PR40. When I do some unboxing, I'll probably go over to the headset mic. The one thing about this microphone, and the reason why I don't do unboxings a lot of times with this microphone, is it's attached to my desk, because the desk actually will roll away if I needed to, so I can actually stand up and do things. And the table transfer happens, so you can probably hear when I tap the table. I also like it. I have it with my underslung arm mount, so I can move this around really easily, but still be able to get my arms up because I have my Stream Deck right here, and I can get to the buttons really quick and move around without this microphone getting in the way. And of course, with this angle, I'm probably still going to get a pop filter before it, but it's nice to not have that extra stuff around the microphone.
Go ahead, Stuart.
Yeah, all of the above, plus, yes, a little bit of personal preferences. I've got this one hanging because I wanted it mounted off of something hard that was isolated away from the desk, because I'm quite loud when I hit the keys on the keyboard, and there's the fan noise that would come through, and I just want to eliminate as much of that as possible. This is a side address mic, so it is on the angle, and so I'm speaking past it. But the other thing is where it is physically enables me to be able to see all of the screen to my right from my left eye. I'm only just cutting off the edge of the screen with the microphone in front of me. So that's part of my reason. It's like what is in my eye line, and this is just slightly out of my central eye line.
Bill?
Stuart addressed a little bit about but we're talking about microphones on a desk in a situation like this. The other place where mic position can be really useful is out in the field. If you're doing field recording, if you're using a low mic position up at somebody and you have aircraft flying over or a thunder or something like that, that's a really bad thing, because past what the mic is pointed at, there will be sounds up there. The same thing if you're inside and there's a really hard floor and people are walking, using the traditional boom position overhead pointed down can enhance that steps noise. So it's a combination of the microphone type you're using, its pattern, what it's picking up, and always just listen for the things you don't want to hear, and then figure out how to reposition your microphone so that it emphasizes what you do want to hear and de-emphasizes what you don't want to hear.
Go ahead, Sky.
I got nothing. Okay. That was awesome.
Yeah,
that was fantastic. But my one point is from Brian Maddox. He said the one thing you're trying to do is get your audio sound out of your lips into somebody else's ears. And so that's the pointing of the mic, all of this that I didn't know. I'm a civilian, but to listen to these people that make their living on this as a profession and have done it for decades, that was amazing. And not a single name of a product was used. It's all theory. Awesome.
For when I do interviews, I do 3 mics for everybody. And so I have 2 shotgun mics that come down and 1 shotgun mic that comes up. so I do a bit of both for any interview that I do. And the reason for that is that, or almost not every interview, but almost every interview that we do, if we have a lot of foot traffic in front of the person, I might not put that front mic down, but I try to do it that way most of the time. And the reason is that if I don't like what I got from the top mics, which is my primary mics, I have the lower mic that can sometimes fill in when something happened with the upper mics or something like that. So next question.
Craig Kadoki in Toronto, Canada is up next. I'm looking for a new camera, considering the Brio is a minimum spec for office hours, and I'm not in the Blackmagic 6K league. What would the panel recommend? And points for Black Friday sales. Remember, I'm in the Great White North. So Craig's up in Toronto.
Go ahead, David.
I'm a fan of the Sony cameras. The Sony ZV-1 is around $650. You don't need a lens. It does not have interchangeable lenses. The Sony ZV-E10 is around $700. You do need a lens for that. It'll run you about $100 extra bucks. The Sony A6400 is what I use, along with a Sigma lens that'll put you back just over $1,000. One thing to be aware of is that Sony has just halted production on 3 of its Alpha series cameras because of supply chain issues, including the A6400.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Sorry, I had to click 4 times on that microphone. I went with the Carl's recommendation, and the same camera that Grant just had, as he was in earlier today, is the Canon M50 Mark II, which it's a great DSLR. It has Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, all that stuff built in. You can get it with a kit lens for about $700. It has USB interface and HDMI out, clean. Has autofocus, which is fairly decent. You can set it to look for your eyeballs or recognize your face, so it'll track your face as you move around. And I just have it set on auto, and it does a fairly decent job of adjusting to the different light levels that come in through as the sun rises coming through the window here, and that's another important feature to look for. The only downfall for it is the battery situation, is it does not have external battery port on it. You have to buy a dummy battery with a connector on it to power it full time.
It's such a goofy Canon thing. Like it's been that way for a decade. You'd think at some point they seem very committed to that.
It has a USB port on it that you can hook it up as a USB, as a webcam, but it won't power the camera. I don't know why.
Some companies can get really goofy about, they get dogmatic about something that is just, you're just like, what are they
Well, I think
thinking?
it requires 7.5 volts, which may be the reason, but
Still,
anyway.
Stuart.
Well, Courtney just stole the majority of my answer, but because I was going to quote Carl as well. But just two things to point out about both the Sony and the Canons. The Canon USB driver is 720p, not 1080. And the Sony's Wi-Fi connection is 720p as well. One piece of advice, and I say this as somebody who has 7 Pentax cameras, do not try this with a Pentax camera.
Rupert?
The HDMI output is completely ruined.
Yeah.
I misread the question. I'll pass.
Ken?
Yeah, if you want to stay with the Blackmagic family, but not go up to the 6K, the studio camera, I think it's $1,200 from DVE store. And there are a number of Micro Four Third lenses that fit on that. Really good quality. That's what I'm presently using now. I've got all 3 and I'm presently using that one as my studio camera.
Yeah, we've used the Micro Studio a lot. Yeah, because it's just such a great, it's the same form factor almost of a webcam. And it looks really good as well. Next question.
Rupert McRae is back from Dallas, and the panel. Last year, software company GitLab pioneered the case for companies to create a head of remote role. They basically wrote the book on it. Many companies are now citing this as the gold standard. Any thoughts on it? And he's got a URL to link to it.
Go ahead, Sky.
I looked at the link. I think it's a fail because there is not, there's as a visual person, there is maybe a graph, but it is just like 12 pages of sheer text. And the showing and the doing of a thing is far more a way people perceive versus the density of so much tiny 8-point text. While that's great information, I would rather my guess is they have a very good marketing team, and it could be very good researched information. But to claim that they wrote the book on something does not give them the authority of accuracy. It's just they wrote a book. Yeah, they wrote a book.
I think that it'd be really interesting to study some of the companies that are very forward thinking about this, and rather than trying to persuade people about whether it is or not, talk to companies that are making this actually work. And I think that for me, of all the things I've read so far, I feel like Dropbox is the furthest along, where it says we've got offices, you can come in, you can stay at home, we'll give you a budget for your home kit, and I think that kind of laissez-faire, like use it as you need it, is the future. And I think that it's not all remote. I think that it's hard for some people, but it's not also all in the room or even hybrid. There's a lot of people like hybrid. I think makes sense to somebody in that it makes sense to people who don't have kids. like it's all or nothing. Like I got to figure out how to deal with kids all the time, or I don't. And I think that people. So if you don't have kids, hybrid. Oh yeah, they'll just come in a certain number of days a week, but that really creates havoc. For parents. Go ahead, Rupert.
To be clear, they're not saying they wrote the book on it. That's my perception of what's happening. Because if you take the time to read, everything they've laid out, they do ask some probing questions about how is your company going to handle these things,
right?
For your staff, for your organization, whatever, for your business. And other companies are seeing that and taking notice because they're seeing out there, companies are they're creating that role for themselves and saying, look, we want you to follow this standard published by GitLab because we believe in it.
And I think that we should look at that, and probably this is something for next year, but publish some of our own stuff about it, just because I think we're further along in a lot of ways than a lot of companies as far as figuring out how to build a culture online, because I feel like we have built a culture online. So I think that we should think about that as a group. Next question.
Comes to us from Douglas Carmichael, and Douglas says, what experiences have you had with live captioning and subtitling services?
Go ahead, John.
Gotta say, last year we did the same event that we did 2 weeks ago. And last year we had to use a third-party captioning system and feed those back into Zoom. The built-in stuff in captioning in Zoom now is really good, and it worked really well. And people are able to push those up ad hoc, so that works out really well for us.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I just think the whole industry has evolved so much in the last 5, 10 years. Before, captioning was a specialist thing. Now there are all these AI-driven sites. I use Simon Says, but there's a bunch of them out there that you literally just send them an audio file. They will grab text from it. It is only 95, 98 sometimes % accurate. And that means that out of every 100 words, you may have an error. So it does require manual editing and conforming after you get it back from any automated service. But the amount of hassle that has been taken out of this and the speed at which you can get things captioned now means that really there's no reason not to caption all your work and put it up online so that everybody, print disability or not, gets access to the same stuff.
Yeah, there's two different worlds. One is live, and the other one, and Zoom has got one set of requirements, and then there's like live captioning, and then there's post, and they're very, very different as far as how you work with those. So, still, when we're doing live captioning for a live video, we're still using hardware for that. We're using people, and the reason is that typically we have a captionist for a large event watching all the rehearsals and figuring out, oh, I need that word, or, oh, that's what they're going to say there. And they practice and they practice and they practice with every rehearsal. And the AI doesn't practice as much, and now you can put, for AI solutions, you can put often the best ones, you can put libraries in, look for these things, or don't ever say this word, or don't always, look, and guide towards it. But a human is always going to be able to figure that out a little bit better. And these stenographers, if you find a good one, are really good. Their offset will be about 3 to 4 seconds from real time. And if you change your buffer and your encoder, you can actually, in some cases, if you're not using 608, 709, so like with YouTube, for instance, you have HTTP inputs. If you use an HTTP input into YouTube and then you offset your buffer on your encoder, you can actually line the captions live up to exactly the same as what's coming in. So we can really tighten that solution really effectively. Most services YouTube has an HTTP service, which we use for that kind of thing. Most of them use what's called a 608, 708 insertion. So it basically inserts the captioning data into the line 21 of the bank data. It's actually the same place that Blackmagic puts all their camera controls. So you can't mix and match those. So anyway, so you usually it goes through your what we use as an EEG 492 goes through that right before it goes out to encode. So it's the last thing that happens to your video before it goes out. And this will actually, in case you're wondering, does work with 10-bit, and it doesn't. So that can be important for some people. And so. Anyway, so as you go into that, then it's just a matter of how that service is going to handle that. Facebook, YouTube, kind of Twitter will handle 608, 708. Twitter display of captions is kind of a disaster. For Zoom, the AI is really good when the best solution is a person with a stenographer linked directly into Zoom is going to give you the highest quality. It's amazing at the structure and everything else. For post, I follow Bill's lead and I use Simon Says. Now, admittedly, I will admit that Mike Matzdorf, who's part of that, is a friend of mine, and so and so he's the one that got me into it. But whether he got me, that's not usually enough for me to use something over and over again. I'll try it because it's a friend, but I use it over and over again because it's super easy. And the most important thing about Simon Says for post is that it gets me all my times correct. So it may not have every word correct, but every caption is correct. Correct timing. And so all I have to do is open it up in whatever I'm going to use. If it's, for me, it's Resolve or Final Cut, and just edit I can just go in and edit the couple words that are off, but I don't have to figure out when they came in, which saves me most of the time that I need. I will say that I believe right now Final Cut is the easiest one to edit captions in of all of them. There's a lot of bugs in Resolve that they've been fixing, but wow, like some devastating bugs in Resolve that have been really problematic for us. Resolve has more features, and those features break, and that's the problem with them currently. But and I haven't done it at all in Premiere because I haven't used Premiere for 20 years. Go ahead, Alex.
One other aspect of this is not for live subtitling or live captions, but I think the tool you use to edit the captions is very important. One of the advantages of SpeedScriber, maybe over the others, is the fact that even though it uses the same online cloud services to do the transcription, the actual editor it comes with is actually designed for editing captions. You click on words, if you press the period button, it adds a period, or if you press the comma button, it adds a comma, so you can do punctuation really well, and it's used for breaking up captions really well. So it's actually a text editor that only works and specifically designed for captions, including capitalization and stuff like that. So I really strongly suggest that you use SpeedScriber. It uses the same AI as all the others, but it's got a really good editor in it.
And Simon Says has an editor as well, and I admit I edit everything in Final Cut. Like I literally, because I can see it. The big thing about captions is not just that they said the right words, but it's what's in each line. So you actually want to go in to the lines, and you may want to, if there's two thoughts in a line, you want to make sure that one's on one line and one's on the other. And so like a comma plus a word plus another line, I'll move it from that top line. I'll move that one word over. So there's all this crafting that you do of the subtitles that makes it easier for the user to read. And so you have to think about when you really take this to another level. It's one thing to just have the text coming up. It's another thing to have it be a fluid and nice thing to look at. Then the next step when you watch stuff on TV is that moving the captions around, moving subtitles. Captions are always 32 characters wide. They're in the middle of the screen at a certain position. Subtitles can be all kinds of things. And we usually refer to most of what we do as subtitling, not captioning, because we want to stay out of the legal rules of captioning, which is there's a legal structure for that. With subtitling, you start moving it, like I'm going to have this subtitle under this person and this subtitle under this person. That tells the viewer who can't hear, it helps guide them on who's talking when, and things can overlap and everything else. It gets really interesting when you start to move things around in that process. And things like Final Cut will handle, I've edited as many as 8 languages in Final Cut, and so you can also be looking at how they're all managed, in that process. And so it's a fun little place to go down, and it's super useful for people. Where it really blew up was when Facebook put it in, because people use it. It became marketing, not accessibility, and then suddenly there was tons of money. So unfortunately, that's what it took to turn it over. But now people are putting it everywhere, and I would highly recommend getting better at it. We could, again, if people put it in the second hour, we can definitely talk about it. I can probably get a couple useful people to come on too. Next question.
Moving down to the Southern Hemisphere, Stuart Fairweather here in the panel from Melbourne, Australia. And he says, is there such a thing as a network hub switch or router that can be bonded to multiple connections, be they 4G, 5G, fiber, or cable?
Go, Rupert.
So for bonding internet connections, that is to say to aggregate the bandwidth from different connections rather than failover or load balancing. But for bonding, there are ways to do it, but all of them rely on you having the piece of hardware or the service at your end and the corresponding service or hardware or infrastructure in the internet or in the cloud, because those connections have to be multiplexed at your end and demultiplexed somewhere else. So a good example is PepWave. You get the PepWave router, you can put all kinds of different connections into it on your side, and then you either have their service on the back end in the cloud to break out those connections, or you can get their product and host it yourself in the cloud to aggregate those connections on the far end. But without that, you're going to be just load balancing, basically.
Good guy.
Yeah, exactly what Rupert was saying. There's a couple of different products. I would look at, I know he's in Australia, but for the other people that are listening that may have a need, Tucker rents these PEP links. If you don't need them, multiple times a year, then I would just rent. And same with this other company, Pop-Up Wi-Fi. They do the same type of thing where they'll blanket an area. Teradek also has a product called The Link that will allow you to blanket an area, and you can also use. So this is for sending internet across an area and then bonding it. So that's the product that does that. No encoding of the video. This is just sending internet. Product that I use that I'm coming to you now through is just a Ubiquiti Dream Machine Pro, which has the dual WAN. So you can set this to aggregate, where it'll load balance or fail over. So which do you want? Do you want it to aggregate the two together, or do you want it to only fail over? I have mine to fail over, and that was suggested by the IT guy at our office as well, that not to send packets over both at the same time, because you can have them coming at different times. And then for if it's just straight video, I mean, I would just use a live view like this, and this has USB. I could throw 2 USB modems in here. I can throw Ethernet in here and Wi-Fi, so I can get 4 connections. And then with their LRT service in the cloud, I can see which one's doing best, and it'll pick which one is doing best, or I could manually go in there and tweak it and say, use this connection only, especially if it's a metered connection.
Go ahead, Dennis.
So yeah, I'm also doing failover. I am using the TP-Link Archer C7, and I've got the OpenWRT firmware on that, which allows you, basically, it's running Linux, and you can install what you want on it and do what you want with it.
Yeah, most of what we've done is the PEP, some version of a PEP wave has been mostly how we built those out. Tucker also does the rentals for large scale events. We've also used Castle Point Technologies in the United States. They do a really large scale bonding and processing. It just gives you the internet, like they just solve it for you across, very large events, not just an event, but many connections and many backups. Next question.
Comes to us from Sky Gleason here on the panel in Seattle, Washington. For a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K Pro, what lens would be good for studio work?
Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, I recommend the Sigma 24-70 zoom lens. It's a really good price. It's a good lens for that.
There you go, Charles.
I think it depends on your definition of studio work and what you're doing. For the stuff that I see a lot in studios that I'm at, there's usually a set of Sigma primes, and that's just for the type of work that they do. I've also seen a few like the Milvis lenses, and that's because of the sharpness, especially when you're planning to do post-production and VFX and all that stuff. After that, it's sort of like size master primes that you could get into. But once you're at that price range, you're probably not using a Blackmagic. So I would probably just stick to the Sigma, a good zoom. Like Ken said, I would probably just get you in a good place.
Go ahead, Ken. Or Guy?
Yeah, the one that we used in Mad in the Kitchen, the big bad boy. You didn't specify budget, so see what happens. There you go. The Cabrio 20-120 with the Duclos EF mount, and that will rock and roll.
Tesla lens.
I used to own 4 of those, and I got to say, they're very nice lenses. They work well, and with the motorized, you can put them on telemetrics heads. I'm just telling you, they're amazing. What I use mostly for all around lenses are 24-70s. I have L series Canons, but if I was going to buy them on a budget, I would probably get the Sigmas. Next question.
Sky Gleason in Seattle, back with Kenn Jordan. What are the smaller lights you're using on your Zoom set?
Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, I'm not really using the smaller lights. It's the P300s. The small, I'm using one aperture. It's the B7C as a fill light here. And that sometimes I do use the, I'll go back to my picture. Sometimes I do use these lights as well, but it's mainly the
what's the name of that?
B7C. This is the aperture. You'll find it on DVE Store. I'll put the link into it on there. But what I would recommend now, there's the new P60s, P60C and a P60X that Aperture have just brought out. They're a small version of my massive panel lights, and they're more than adequate for studio. And they do them as a set of 3. And again, they're on the DVE Store. That's what I would recommend now for a studio setup of lighting, would be those P60s.
Likely I'll be going there today.
Next question.
Comes from Craig McFarlane in Boston, Massachusetts. Says, I'm curious on the mic check order, as it doesn't seem Zoom participant or alpha order. Is that a Mukana feature?
Go ahead, Rupert.
So the person doing the mic checks will typically follow their gallery, the participants in gallery view as it appears on their screen, which may not necessarily be exactly the same for everybody at the moment, because that's generally derived from how when they were logged in and when everybody else was logged in. So that's kind of how it goes.
Go ahead, Bill.
Well, exactly that. Since I do it often in the mornings, it is what I'm seeing in front of me, and that is determined by how soon or late people log in. And occasionally somebody logs out and then logs back in, changing the order of everybody and driving me insane. So that's just how it is.
Next question.
Next one comes from David Paskin in Miami, Florida. He says, is there a difference in the quality running audio directly from a mixer to a computer via USB rather than going through an audio interface?
Go ahead, Michael.
Hi, David. It really does depend upon the quality of the mixer and the quality of your digital converters. The less you can do, the better. So if you could go directly with a USB interface, and good converters like PreSonus, Focusrite, and others, Apogee, are very, very good. But if you need the inputs of a mixer and you have other devices that you want to put in, then go with a good quality mixer.
Good, Courtney.
Yeah, most of the quality comes from the preamps, obviously, and then out of the mixer, you're going to come in at line level to an A to D converter, and there's a large variety of A to D converters. Here's some that use the PCIe bus, which will give you multiple channels of digital input for $14,000 or $15,000. But for most mixers, use this TI chip that is a stereo A to D converter that convert to USB, and you'll find that in most mixers that have USB output on a two-channel USB output and input, and a lot of them use that same chipset, so the quality won't vary much unless you move up to what Michael Drosty just said, to the higher end A to D converters and mixers.
Go, John.
I got stuck in the middle with the audio gods. Now, let me give you my opinion from somebody that doesn't know anything about this. But after 15 years of buying every one of the mixers that have built-in USB, every one of them was noisy compared to my first interface that I bought 5 years ago. And my only impression is most of those mixers were designed for live events, and so the noise floor, the preamps didn't have to be that great as opposed to the interfaces. Night and day difference between the two.
What is the one you bought 5 years ago?
The first interface I bought was the Scarlett.
Got it. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I can't add anything other than to simply say just because you can get it analog audio into USB doesn't mean that it's good. Just because it can do it, you need to have a good one with a good DAC in it that makes it work better. The higher end ones, I use the RMEs. I have a Yellow Tech floating around here, and I prefer personally Benchmark as a way of getting the analog audio out of anything into a computer.
Good, Rupert.
Just watch out for the use case. I know we've seen differences in behavior. Like, for example, if you're coming into Zoom sometimes handles these things differently. You may come in one way and it collapses all your channels and messes up your input. So you may just want to check out each use case and things on a app by app basis like Zoom.
Yeah, for me, the noise floor and the preamp is probably more important than how the USB is being connected. I think that's where you get most of your sound, which is why I tend to use sound devices for my USB interfaces, whether it's all of our kits have mixed pre 3s. I'm using a Scorpio, which is completely overkill for this. But their preamps are incredibly transparent and low noise. So that to me is more important from a mixer perspective than the USB, the D-DAC or A to D converter. Next question.
Lucas Herzog in Mainz, Germany, it says, looking into buying speakers to enhance the sound of a movable flat screen in a meeting room. Any recommendations, preferably mountable to the screen?
Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I just want to talk about one little thing here, and that is that you're talking about a meeting room, so mostly speech. You're not talking about music. Music is where you get into difficulty with any kind of mountable speakers, because in order to create a lot of low end, you need mass and magnets and power, and that usually doesn't go along with mounting it on the edges of a flat screen. But most human speech, which is the articulation, is what you need to get the content, which is mission number one in a meeting room kind of circumstance. That means tweeters, high and mid-range sound. So there's just ample numbers of small mountable flat screen compatible speakers that should do a pretty good job of that. It's not going to be terribly difficult to find something.
Go ahead, Rupert.
And for meeting room applications, there are plenty of new vendors now specializing in this space. So if you're doing the whole video conferencing thing, I mean, if you're using Zoom or Teams, check out those vendors and their approved products. I mean, Neat do a lot of these Neat bars. Of course, that would include a camera, but then the audio side of that is, as optimized as it can be for, speech in a, hybrid meeting room type environment.
Yeah, I would look at speaker bars, and with subwoofers, even if it's movable screen, I'm going to assume that you have it's on some kind of stand, so you can actually put something in there, and you'd probably, without, in a couple $100, move the quality of the audio dramatically up. So it just depends on how much you need or how much you want. Next question.
Jack B in Phoenix, Arizona says, excited to be receiving my maker pipe soon. Just got shipping notification. What will you build with yours? I have 3 desks I'm going to be building or remodeling.
Go ahead, Rupert.
Just seeing this thing unfold. I think,
yeah, this is gonna be crazy.
I think this should be, I know Damianti's out for a couple of weeks. I think this should be a substitute, like cook along, make a pipe, make along,
I'm definitely going to show work in progress as we go through it. I'm building my entire studio around it. My desk, a teleprompter, all of the piping, the shelves, everything is going to all be maker pipe, just because it allows me to kind of think and move at the same time without spending too much money. So we'll keep talking about that. We're actually going to get Maker Pipe is going to join us in a couple weeks. After so many people were excited about it, I reached out to them and said, hey, do you guys want to actually come on? And they're like, sure. So anyway, we'll have 2 weeks from Friday, I think we'll have them on. Next question.
And Jack B is right back from Phoenix, and he says, in the market for a gently used Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K, been looking at eBay and OfferUp. Any suggestions for places to find gently used cameras?
Charles?
I was just at B&H the other day giving them some more of my money, and they had 4.
So easy.
But yeah, it's very easy in there. But I just checked, and they're all gone. So it seems like you're not the only one looking for that camera. Now, Adorama, which is down the street from B&H, has one in stock. I would check them out. The reason why I like them is because they're in my vicinity, so I can actually go and speak to a professional and check it out in person. And I've had a pretty good experience if I buy some used equipment for them, or if it's used on a set or anything like that. So that would be my approach. It seems like you're in Phoenix, so that's not an option for you, but I would check them out.
Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, for those of us not in the US, the site I'd highly recommend is called mpb.com. I've had really good luck with getting lenses and stuff from them, and their cameras as well.
Next question.
Comes to us from our friend Tlaloc Lopez Waterman. He says, Guy spoke about a new pan tilt zoom head that could work with the Pocket Cinema line. Anyone tried it or thinking about trying it?
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, there's been one out for a while from Data Video, and then Salray Works also had one for bigger cameras, and of course there's Mark Roberts at the high end boat. The one that we got the email about yesterday that was supposed to drop it at IBC, but it got canceled, is this one that has, it's NDI, so it's video and audio and camera controls coming over NDI, and what makes this one exciting for cameras that have the Lank control is that you'll see in this diagram that there's a Lank output. So now I can zoom, I can focus a handycam style camera, so like a Panasonic or Sony or something like that. So we'll see where this one goes. But as far as what it does with the pockets, I'm not sure what all it'll be able to actually do besides pan and tilt. I don't think we're going to get any zoom out of it because there's no Lank input on a pocket camera. But there's probably somebody will figure out a way to convert that signal. I'm sure maybe one of the guys from Middle Things might be able to do something with that.
There's a couple options from Edelchrome as well as Syrup are kind of less expensive solutions for lighter cameras. That might be something worth checking out as well. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next, and Douglas says, an article about work from home in our industry, and he's got a link there, said remote work can have an adverse effect on company culture. Why would that be, and how can it be mitigated?
Go, Rupert.
Sigh.
Sorry.
I mean, different companies are going to see this different ways. And, to say culture, I mean, that's probably true. Some companies have different cultures, and, this whole thing may pan out differently for different folks. But I look at it this way: there are some companies out there and some workflows that do see a way that this is going to work for them. And so the way I try and filter it is to think about the people who say that it won't work for them and try and understand why, because there are some people out there who say it will work and that it will work for them and they have data to support it or reasons to support it, and other people saying it won't. So there's likely to be a lot of confirmation bias out there for the sort of things people want to believe. But in terms of production, what I can say is SMPTE have sent me a whole poster on the future of cloud production. So, you know, they know it's the future, and just not everybody may have their eyes exactly wide open. And, you know, different companies, different managers, different people may have their opinions, but sooner or later, I think you need to look at, well, where are they getting their information?
Mm-hmm. Here you go, Bill.
This is such a big topic right now. There's been so much disruption. And I think this idea, the pandemic pushing so many people in so many industries into more work from home, it's going to take, I think, a decade for this to settle out. And I'm thinking of two things in particular. The people that I've known through corporate culture, I worked inside offices in corporate for a while, and then I became a sole proprietor and visited many different corporate cultures and watched how people work. Some of the pieces of that, the management is going to have a real hard time giving up. You know, it's not exactly punch a time clock, but that's the tradition that it comes from. You're all going to be in your desk at this time, and your supervisors can look around, see who made it and who's late and who's taking it seriously and who's not. You diffuse that all to work at home, and it's really hard to put that into metrics that can be entered into a spreadsheet and tracked by the people who like to do that stuff. And there are people whose job it is to do that stuff. It's going to determine, I think, who is self-motivated and who needs external motivation. And those externally motivated people are going to have difficulty, I think, fitting into the new world, because it's so easy to hide and not be productive when you don't have to be someplace at a particular time. And everything now becomes your work product. But I've run into circumstances in my career where people were really pretty lazy and pretty bad in a corporate. They sat at a desk in the corner and nobody noticed them, and they still made it through 10 or 15 years without really contributing all that much to the successful completion of projects. And it astonished me when I ran into a few of those. Plus, I saw some purely incompetent people who were given a job they just didn't know how to do. And it was months and sometimes years before it was discovered that they really didn't know what they were doing. And that's the downside to work at home. You have to be self-motivated and you have to push yourself into being productive and being good for your company. And that's going to be a tough change.
I think people who aren't used to working at home have a hard time working at home. I think that's and they want to write articles about why this is hard. But the companies like visual effects companies that I've worked with that have been working from almost a lot of them from day one as virtual have no problem with it. In fact, they're probably more responsive and move faster because they understand how to transfer all the files. I work with a company called Boundary Effects. They're the old Pixel Core compositing team. Like they literally are a company that came out of a team. They have never, I think it was years before they even met each other in person, and they were doing business, and they're still the company. If I need some roto done, I just ping them and boom, it's done. like I send it to them, I get it back. And they have spread out all over the world. They have roto artists that are all over the world that are working for them. So it's not, they are the front end for me of, I don't know who's rotoing it, but I know that it's going to come back perfect, and it's quite a thing. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael up next. Would I have any issues delivering soundtracks for video content if I can only run my DAW at 44.1 kilohertz?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Oh, you may have some people look down their nose at you, but almost all video editing packages allow for sample rate conversion on the way in, because you got to realize that most sound effects packages that were out there came on CDs, so they were all originally sampled at 44.1 or stored at 44.1. So sample rate conversion has gotten pretty good, so it can come into any timeline, and the editing package that they're working with, the video editor, will sample rate convert it to whatever their timeline is set to.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I agree with Courtney. It's depends on what you're using, but if it's a good editing program, it's pretty much transparent. Most broadcast stuff is 48. 44.1 is left over from the old days of CDs and audio coming from DAWs in the beginning before they started multiple sampling. In fact, I like to take audio from CDs and sample it at 88.2 just to, because I thought that was a better mathematical conversion for jitter and things like that. So, Douglas, it's not going to be a problem unless you hear there's a problem.
You can also batch convert it. No one's going to hear the difference. like if you just batch convert everything to 48 and deliver it, no one's going to go, oh, I can hear 44 was converted to 48. It's not going to happen. Next question.
Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Up next with my primary intention for headless Windows PC is 1080p. 4K UHD units also claim 1080p in specs. Should I look for a 1080p model? The default res is always correct, or reduce the res with the 4K? Any effect on screen scraping and or Parsec usage?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Default res doesn't really mean much, except for if you're using HDMI out on the unit, like the B-Link by Courtney, has USB 2.0, which is capable of 4K 60 on both of those HDMI outputs. So as long as it's rated for the HDMI output is rated at 4K, then you shouldn't have any problem at any resolution below that. And Windows, of course, is resolution agile. The only thing you get into a native resolution on is if you have an LCD screen, like a laptop or a tablet or something hooked up to it that's driving that headless Windows machine.
Good, Rupert.
If you're going to run it headless and unattended, meaning you can't get to it quickly if there's a problem, I would stick with the 1080s, because if it reboots or something, or drivers go skewy, then it's just one less thing to worry about if you cannot get to the config in a hurry.
The only thing I'll say is I do believe, based on our conversation last week, that Parsec does need you to run it at the resolution you want to see it at, because it's grabbing your frames from the video file, from the video card, or from the video chip. So it's actually going in there and grabbing it before it goes out. So it does matter what resolution that is capable of to get that resolution. Next question.
Rupert McRae back again with, can a LinkedIn live stream be trimmed after the event to clean up the video for watching again?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yes, it can actually. Tips and tails though. So this is basically how it happens. You go in the video, up on the top corner that says edit video, you hit there, and then you'll be able to trim the front and the top, and then hit done from there, and you're good to go. Good.
Kudos to LinkedIn. They got to that tool faster than anybody else. Being able to top and end your video is something we asked for forever for YouTube, and then forever for Facebook. And LinkedIn seemed to figure out that, we should probably put that in much sooner. Yeah, next question.
Douglas Carmichael back again. Would there be any audio clicking issues using one device, like a groovebox, as my DAW input device, and another, like my SoundGrid network, as the output device? I've had issues with aggregate devices on my Mac OS in the past.
Michael?
I've been very lucky with aggregate devices. It works well. The only thing I would add to try is to update the software and update the firmware on your groovebox, and make sure that you have the latest running firmware and software. And then also make sure you're using a similar, like on my Mac Pro, I have USB card. Make sure you're using the same USB card, shortest cables possible, and have everything coming out the same.
I just run it for a long period of time, and listen to it. When you have clocking issues across a network, it'll drop out for a couple seconds, and it will happen randomly, and you need to listen to it for like a day or two. Just let it play music or play something, and just have it in the background, and you'll know whether you're having a problem or not. If it doesn't happen in a couple of days, it probably won't happen. Next question.
Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. Up next, has anyone had any experience with Cato Vision cameras, good or bad? And he's got a link there.
Cato Vision. I don't think I'm familiar with it. I think you've stumped us, Chris. We'll have to do some more research, and you have to ask again, or you'll have to come on and
high protein video.
Yeah. What if they have a Green Hornet model?
Yeah, I just watched a thing about martial arts in Hong Kong martial arts, and so all I could think of was Bruce Lee. Next question.
Yes, Sky Gleason in Seattle here in the panel said, how is Alex using SketchUp for creating the MakerPipe rigs?
It's how I'm planning them. So they sent me the models of of their connectors. So they sent me step models. I'm going to convert those and get them into I don't even know if I need to convert them, but throw them into SketchUp. Now I can sit there and build out everything to size, with putting the connectors where I want them, and then I can start doing things like counting the connectors and how many I need. And if I build them as instances, I believe, I haven't done this for a little while in SketchUp, I should be able to, like, it'll just give me a list of how many I need of everything. So it just makes it a lot easier to accessorize. Next question.
Robert Barrow of Plymouth Meeting, Pennsylvania says, can you do a second and third hour segment with Alex Lindsay, sharing stories about anything, production, farming, life, audio, whatever?
Okay, that's called after hours. So random moments in after hours. That's just, we're not going to put it up in office hours. For those of you listening, I went a little off on describing farm life, the dark side of farm life, over not really dark, but like, people, with their losing arms and stuff like that. Next question.
Tony Mobley in Noonan, Georgia. Can Alex 4D Goldner talk about his animation transitions?
Alex.
Oh, that's very kind of you. Yes, a few years ago, about 5 or 6 years ago, I made a plugin pack for Final Cut Pro because I felt that lots of people don't really like using keyframes to animate stuff. So I found a way of animating stuff on and off the screen really easily, which is to get your logo or picture or video and drop a transition on it, and that transition makes it bounce onto the screen or slide or whatever you want. But there's not much time, so go to alex4d.com/animation transitions to find out more, and there's 20% off this week. Thank you.
Please put that in the Mukana.
Next question.
Alex 4D is right back again this time, as a topic, using mix effects to work on super sources. If I want to add borders to them, is that information stored in the ATEM super source JSON?
Go ahead, Alex.
Adam Towers actually saw that question and answered it partially in terms of the fact that mix effect, most ATEM switches it works for they don't have this feature of adding borders. So I still don't quite know the answer to this question because I'd like to know if the actual JSON includes the border information.
They don't have border lines on the super sources. I'm not looking for graphics that are borders. I'm just looking for, I think that you should be able to just turn a stroke on, I guess.
Yes, so you can, using the interface on Mix Effect, you can add an inner border, outer border, and also a fading away in color. But my copy of Mix Effect isn't controlling the copy of the switcher over at Office Hours 2.0 yet.
Okay.
So, yeah. We'll work on that. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Because I think it can do border. I don't know if it can do one of the problems we've had is actually true, like building a graphic border around something that's animatable inside of Mix Effect, which we figured out how to do, but it takes two switchers, one that keys the borders in, the other one that moves them around. It's a little ugly. Next question.
Oh, our old friend Laura Seal. Haven't seen you in a long time. Please come back to the panel, Laura. Did any of you ever own a Video Devices Pix LR and have an opinion on those preamps?
Courtney?
I don't know what the Pix LR is. I have a Pix 240, which Alex has probably within reach. Reach for it, Alex. Reach for it. And it has very good audio preamps and XLR inputs, and I use that as an audio interface quite often. If you need to go to HDMI or SDI, it works well.
There it is. I had to prove it that I was right there. There it is, my Pix 240. It was under so many wires. The Pix LR, I believe, is the feature. It's in the Pixie 5 and Pixie 7. There is an undercarriage that you can buy that will attach to the bottom of the Pixie 5 and Pixie 7, which is the LR. The LR preamps are significantly better than the ones in the Pix 240. I don't know what I can say about them, but they're really, really high quality. Like as good as it gets. So anyway, they're very high quality preamps. Next question.
Michael Drosty in Peoria, Illinois has a whole bunch of plugins alert here. Black Friday alert, all on sale now. ikmultimedia.com's Moto Drum SE is $29.99 or $39.99. Moto Bass SE is also $39.99. Bob Clearmountain's plugins and all Apogee plugins are 40% off at Apogee Digital. And based on the Lexicon 480, the LX 480 by Relab Development is also on sale. So
good. Real quick, Michael.
Quick, just take a look at the IK Multimedia stuff. It's modeled instruments, and you can actually control the bass strings if they're new or vintage bass strings. You can go and control if it's finger or if it's picked or if it's slapped. You can control on the on the drum set, if it's a felt drum head, drum beater, if it is a plastic drum beater, or if it is a wood drum beater. I mean,
Wow.
you control the littlest things on IK Multimedia. Bob Clearmountain, I can't say enough about him. There's so much there that he has done with the Stones, Bon Jovi, Toto, David Bowie, and he created these iconic sounds. And his assistant said, well, can't you replicate those with plugins? And he goes, no, I've tried. And so he came out with his own plugins, 3 plugins, and like you can get Cashmere drums, the Stones vocal, this, and it's just iconic and amazing. And go ahead.
No, go ahead.
The last one, the Lexicon. If you want that 80s reverb vibe, the LX480 is 70% off and $29. And that's one I told Douglas Carmichael about in editing time and space sliders to get that 80s drum sound.
And I can say that IK Multimedia continues the skeuomorphic. They have a lot of fun with that. Just in case you're worried that they might do it. I remember when that company came out, and they had like one little interface to an iPhone. And now I just went to their website. I just couldn't believe how much they've grown as far as what they provide.
Yeah, made out of Italy.
Yeah. All right. We are now changing subjects to our second hour. So we're going to move into it. We had this discussion about we had a discussion about studios in after hours and maybe a little in office hours. And anyway, so I thought they would be fun for us to talk about. The question was really $15,000, but we moved it to 20 because we're assuming an empty room. There was some stuff already in the room that we had been discussing there. So if you have questions about it or suggestions as a producer, you can go ahead and throw those in. But I thought I still we need to build something that I can do a conversation piece and let people raise their hand. So maybe someone in the panel can just say, what would you get? Oh, we'll start with John as we do it. John has figured it all out for us. So he's saved us a lot of time. This might be a really short hour because John has posted this. So John, do you want to walk us through your thought process here?
So not only this is a real studio that I built since office hours came to fruition. And this is Studio C where Chris Fenwick was sitting when he was here at my house. Mm-hmm. And it came in just under 20 grand. If I was to do it again, I would change cameras, but it's a stand-up desk. It's got an M1. It's got an ATEM Mini, 4 monitors. I've got a Sony A7 III. I've got a NewTek PTZ NDI camera. I've got a rear camera that's an old SDI security camera that's the rear feed for, the wide shot. And then I've got we were talking about mixers. That's an old Mackie mixer on the audio side, and then the Heil PR40 that's not shown in here. And what you don't realize when you put these together is all the connectors, the auto poles, the Manfrotto mounts, all that stuff takes a huge amount of time and energy and cost to put all that stuff together.
Right. Looks good. Let's see. Other so when I think about this, I guess you just for now, unless we have someone who threw a question in. Douglas Carmichael asks, "What's your rationale for?" I'm sorry, I jumped into Bill's space there, Bill. So, but if anyone also wants to add anything else to those, I think that my approach to it when I think about studios is, do I want to have a couple cameras? Do I want to have a close up? So as I rebuild my studio, I'm really thinking about I need typically, and we'll say a personal studio, but generally I think of studios as 3 cameras. I just kind of build out 3 cameras for that. I don't really design I kind of push people away from studios that have lots of people in them because I'm like, you can do that, and 3 cameras will give you that. You might want 4 cameras if you want round table discussions in the room, is the play, because you want a wide, 1 close up in the middle, and then 2 wings, that come across. So it's either 3 or 4 cameras to me in a studio. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
I just noticed in Preto's list there, he didn't have a teleprompter, and the way that camera was mounted, it would seem like it'd be easy to hang one in there in front of that.
I left area to put a teleprompter right back in that space. Yep.
You know, for me, you know, everyone knows that I just have lots of Blackmagic 6K cameras, and cost performance. I don't think you need the 6K Pro, but I think the 6K camera means that as you start to build this up, you have all those remote controls that you need. So I think that having cameras other than that make it more difficult to have those controls. And then I don't know if I would go with. I mean, I have a lot of L series 24 to 70s. That's our standard kit, but if I was building my own studio and I had to fit into 20 and I was going to shave something off, I feel like the Sigmas are 95% of the L series, maybe 95%, somewhere in that range. They're not quite as sharp as the L series, but they're close. As we're trying to fit into a $20,000 budget, someone's going to have to tally this as we start to go through it. For me, a X32 is the mixer that I would probably use, just because it's a rack mount. X32, just because I can just have it somewhere. What were you gonna say, John? Is it?
There's the X32. I was just
yeah, exactly. There's the X32. So, it's just that rack mount is such a it gives you put a Dante card into that, and it's just such an engine. You know, you've got a bunch of analog in, a bunch of analog out. You can Dante everything else into it. And for the price, it's just it's really hard to compete. You know, with that as far as your central node. I think that right now, what we know right now is that I would stick inside of 20,000. I'd probably stick with the Blackmagic Extreme. You're going to be able to ISO. You're going to be able to cut anything most of what you want, again, inside of this price point. And so I would probably lean into that. Mac Minis. I will admit that I will go cheap on the Mac Minis and get the 8 gig for engines that run things that you need for your studio. You might want to, I would get 2 or 3 of them. One for teleprompting, one for, and I use old computers for teleprompting because it takes almost nothing. But and my app that I run is on a Mac. That's why I use that. I think to save money, if we were trying to shave at the B-Link by Courtney, with a PC app that did the same thing would probably be fine. I think Courtney wrote one even. So I think that there's an available thing. So that would save you. That would shave off some money and do the same thing. The monitors. I mean, you got to have at least $2,000 worth. Like lots of monitors, more monitors than you think. You always just have more. I would build a teleprompter rather than buy one because it's too much money to build a big one. You want a 24-inch, and the only one that I've seen is the Prompter People one that's like $2,500, and I'm gonna build mine because I don't want to spend $2,500 on it. So, go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, I did actually, because I've had to do this for some companies over here in pounds, but I actually went to the DV store and I've come up with a list of everything. There's 2 places, DV store and then the Apple store, and it all comes under $20,000.
List it off.
Okay, it's the Blackmagic Extreme ISO, the Blackmagic Designer, so broadcast G2 camera. The
and how many of those? Just one?
Just the one. I'll get the Blackmagic Design Studio camera 4K Plus. That to be used as a second camera for overhead. They do a set of 3 Amron P60C full color lights as a kit of 3. They're not available yet, but they're coming. Those are $990. I've got the full list. That the Westcott X Drop neutral gray backdrop as a kit one that pops up. The teleprompter, that's $2,899. The Benro BV4 Pro tripod kit, obviously for the Blackmagic.
I do think the Benros are really good value. Like the Benro tripods are good value.
The Panasonic Lumix GX Vario lens, 12 to 35 mil lens. That's for the overhead camera.
And that has a zoom built in. You can control the zoom.
That's got the zoom. Yes. Yeah. That's $799. The Sidekick in-ears. The Manfrotto 244RC variable friction mount for mounting the studio camera overhead, or with the Manfrotto bracket or the Manfrotto 420B combi boom stand. If you've got the mounting bits, and then the Manfrotto single auto pole, that's where you can mount the lights on. So all of that kit, that's under $13,000 on the DVE store. And then to the Mac store for the base Mac Mini, iPad Pro, with the base Mac Mini, iPad Pro, with obviously the kit to connect it to the Mix Pre with the pencil as well on the iPad. What else did I have in the Mac store? Then the 5K monitor to go with it, and so all of that was just over $5,000. So all of that's still under the 20,000 budget. And that gets you computer, laptop, 2 Blackmagic cameras with the mixer, and then the other bits that you would need, the stands and the cabling and stuff, that would near enough get you. But all of that, and I've got the shopping list in the DVD store where it lists all of that, and I can share that.
Because I think, like, for instance, for me, I think I'm going to be about $1,000 in on my grid that I'm building for my studio, with the EMT pipe, with all the connectors that I need. And that's going to be a shelving unit, a grid, a teleprompter, desk, like all of those things are going to sit under $1,000, and I'm going to have an enormous amount. I mean, if it works, it might not work. This might be a horrible disaster, but if it works, it's going to be a lot of capacity for $1,000, of stuff. And so I think that is, that's the only place where I think that the auto pulls are cool, but I have to admit I'm a real grid snob. Like grids just are life-changing. Like I wouldn't build a studio without a grid. Like it has to be a grid. like a grid, because what happens is the auto poles put the lights where you think you need them, but you can't just go, today I'm going to do something different. I'm going to move it over here. I'm going to put something else over here. The creativity that you get with a grid is, dramatic. And so you now can just move things as you need and move them over, and you're not trying to figure out how would I now support that over there. And what I found when I had a grid in my office that was all speed rail before, I was constantly fiddling with it. Like everything was just in this constant movement of me figuring out exactly where I want the camera, and then when you match a grid with the Manfrotto Magic Arms, now you're in business, because now you're just grabbing something and moving it where you want it and letting it go, and then moving something else where you want it and letting it go. And so that's the only thing I would say is that in any studio that I built for $20,000, like if I went below that, it'd be something, but I would build a grid, for it to attach things to. I think we have.
What are your vertical legs? Are you using the same?
I'm using shelves. so I'm building. I understand. So I'm attaching the grid to shelves. There's going to be shelves all the way around my office, because the number one thing that causes clutter in my office is not places to put things. So I've just decided that I'm going to build, the only place there's not going to be a shelf is I have a fireplace right here that I'm going to actually try to expose in the new camera shot. If it works, we'll be able to have fireside chats, and I'll have a little fire going, off to one side. We'll see if that works or not. So anyway,
you'll have to put leather patches on your jacket.
Yeah. So anyway, but I'm planning to set up shelves all the way around, which I probably am going to really regret that I didn't buy the big grouping thing of the maker pipe. Instead I got the Pro one or whatever. I think I'm going to run out of connectors. Once I do the modeling, I'll know. Anyway, but I'm going to put shelves all the way around, and that's going to be, and so then the grid will just sit on the shelves. In fact, I'm not attaching it to the shelf. I'm putting it on top so that all the weight comes down on those, and so that I think it'll make it more stable. Anyway, so anyway, that's kind of what I'm looking at right now for that piece. But let's jump in. We've got a ton of questions that are stacking up, so I think we've talked long enough to spark the conversation. We're off to the races. So Bill, we'll see what we have.
Okay, we start with Douglas Carmichael, and Douglas Carmichael says, what was your rationale for using DMX lighting when you only have 2 lights? Future expansion?
Go, John.
I've got 9 lights. I've got 9 fixtures. The 2 icons are DMX controlled, but I've got rear lights on both studios, and my whole room in here is all on DMX. So I've got several fixtures. Once you go DMX, you'll never go back.
Yeah, I'm planning to, as I put it up, I don't have quite enough DMX lights yet, but I'm planning to have everything in my studio be DMX. And even if I only had one of them, because now, again, the thing you want to think about when you're building studios is not how you're going to use it today, but how many times you won't do something. This is with everything, with interface, with everything. How you build something defines how you use it. And if you build it for a one-time use, you live in a one-time use, and it's like, oh, that'd be hard to change. And so you don't do it. And by creating that, DMX means that I can change the colors and the intensity and anything, and you'll fiddle with it all the time. Like that's why I would never buy a camera that I can't control with an ATEM. Like I have to be able to control it with an ATEM because I'm constantly fiddling. I'm constantly fiddling with the color. I'm constantly fiddling with the other things, and I can do that because I have that control. Next question.
Sky Gleason asks about my old studio. How much flexibility or repetitive actions did Bill's previous studio have? So I guess I will, let me see if I can pull this up. Yeah, this is my studio. This is not, we're way past the $20,000 build thing. So just understand this is for occasional ideas and the things that I spent a lot of time. I spent probably 2 years planning this and a year constructing it. It was in a converted hay barn behind our property in Scottsdale. The critical things, Alex is talking about grids. I had an IFF Studio rail system up at the top there. And the thing that it allows you to do, which is really cool, you can see the pantographs hanging from that. And he's exactly right about for efficiency, if you have something where you can move a light, not only in X, Y space, but also up and down in Z, it just cuts huge amount of time over. I need to light somebody and I need to move it over just a couple of feet. You'll see rolls of seamless over there. That was the way I handled changing backgrounds really fast. That's a shot. Well, this is a silly little thing, but I bought this mannequin because I was wasting a lot of time having my wife come in to do lighting tests. And she got tired of it. And I said, well, I'm going to put something here I can put lights on and pre-light with that. Let's get through a couple of this. Oh, you can see that even though I didn't have cove walls, you can do that with seamless. Let me think. Let me go back about 10 photos and a couple little things, and then I'll stop talking about it. And if anybody has questions about it, that IFF Studio rail system was just so convenient because you could literally, I don't know if you look at the right side, you'll see a little kind of wire rack. You pull that down with that silver pole, and that means you can move and lock the rails into position, freezing a particular lighting setup. The drape was around a curved thing, so I could bring it in for not only changing the color of the background, but for sound abatement. So a heavy drape made it really useful, and having the lightings on those pantographs, just huge plus. And I really got that studio to the point where I was super efficient at being able to light a person, a thing, whatever, and just get really good results really fast, whether it was a solo performer. And I think I have a shot here of the studio in use, a solo performer or something more complex. It was just really changeable fast.
The thing to always remember when you're building anything like this, a kit or a studio, number one cost of all production is failure. Like if it fails, it doesn't matter what you saved on doing it. Number two cost is labor. So the thing is that and sometimes that'll be your labor, but making things that are hard to work with or hard to deal with, is you're going to be paying for it in labor all the time. Like, and it's just this invisible cost that just kills you. And so you just have to always keep that in mind when you're building things out. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I was going to ask him, it seemed to have a raised floor. Do you use that to run cables under if you have to power something at the back, or was
I didn't. I didn't, Courtney. The thing that I raised the floor for was I wanted a defined state that I could put a camera on wheels if I had to move it around, and it would keep on that. There was a little ridge around it. So a camera operator could move the cameras only within the floor space. So the raised floor was the effective performer area. Everything else, the cameras could come down off of that and work in an apron around the set for when I was doing corporate things. And I had we built a break room in there and did corporate training, have meetings in your break room kind of things. We had as many as 15 people in my studio doing on-camera stuff. Worked fabulously for all of that.
Next question.
Bethany in Mexico said, what would you buy for playing videos in this studio?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I would use HyperDeck Studio Pro, although I found since I purchased it, it's a little quirky. But the great Playout B that Jonas, a frequent panel member, is probably an excellent replacement. It's cheaper. It works great. It's rock solid. So I would go that way.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I'll second the Playout B. It'll run on a Raspberry Pi 4, which is quite inexpensive and small. I have a HyperDeck Mini, but the fans in it are so noisy I can't really use it in the same room that I'm in. So if you're going to have an open microphone and it in the same room as you, then I wouldn't rely on that. And I use, of course, the B-Links, and they work for playing back video, and this video has been playing for several weeks now. And it's pretty reliable with my own software. But I also second, they also make the Playout B for Windows or for Mac. It'll run in a browser, so you can control it on a second video output monitor on your main computer if you want to.
Yeah, I think a Playout B is great as far as being able to control it from the ATEM. I think that the other ones to look at are things like QLab that will let you do a lot of other bits and pieces that are there. And then the one that we use in the office is Softron's On the Air. And the reason we do that is because it does it can be treated like a HyperDeck, just like the other ones. So it'll take HyperDeck protocol requests, but it also does 10-bit and key fill out of a. So those are the other things to think about depending on what scale you need to work at. Next question.
Mitchell Hill in Wilmington, Delaware says, what was the one thing you should spare no expense on?
Go ahead, John.
Camera, lens, and microphone.
Yeah. Go ahead, Charles.
I'd say high-speed internet, because it doesn't matter what you have in your room and you can't get the signal out.
Yeah.
After that, for me, it's my main monitor, and then getting that calibrated just so I can trust what I'm looking at.
Yeah, absolutely. And Douglas, Dennis did get a thing in panel discussion of anyone wanting to say something. So let's hang on to that one. We're just going to not answer that one, but if anyone wants to say other things, we'll put that in. We need to create something that we'll just in the future do this right at the very beginning to make sure that we can set that up. Let's jump to the next one.
Next one comes from Rupert McCrae, and he says it's starting with an empty room. Does the $20,000 budget include fixtures and fittings, even furniture and chairs?
I say we leave the furniture and the chairs out. We're not that interested. We figured that out. I'm actually, when it comes to furniture, I'm building, because that will blow the budget. Because one thing I will say is that if you're going to spend a lot of time in it, especially seated, I would definitely be investing in a good chair, which we could do a whole second hour on. This group could talk for at least an hour about chairs. Go ahead, Courtney.
It should also include about 18 weeks of marriage counseling.
Just remember, here's the deal. The thing that I've learned for this is you have to find a side gig that makes money that you're allowed to keep as your own account. That is the key to the operation. So I have MacBreak, so it's just it's got to be a side gig. It's not part of your salary. It is something else. And then you get your own account for it. And then that's your money,
This is our bass boat.
Yeah, but you got to find something that isn't part of the money that is owned by the boss, and that's the key to the operation for harmony. Next
question comes from Rupert McCrae, and he says, for critical components in a $20,000 budget, shouldn't the budget include spares for redundancy?
I think at $20,000 for the quality that you need, it would be hard to have full spares. I just think that you need to budget more if you want to have spares. I think you'll be lucky to get all those things. Now, I may get too ISO extremes just to have that. But I think that'd be hard to have 2 of everything the way we would normally have it. I would say that I would add into whatever budget UPSs. I've got, in this room alone, I've got 3 UPSs. I have 1 for my internet. I have 1 for my lights and infrastructure, and 1 for the core streaming. And the reason I did that was it splits it out, so it gives me different amounts of time. The lights will last the least amount of time. My infrastructure will last about 20 minutes. My modem will last for 6 hours without power, and so, and then I'm still, so that's, but I think that's the only redundancy that I think we can afford inside of that budget. Next question.
Mitchell Hill's up with, oh no, I'm sorry, it's Charles Klein. Charles says, before equipment goes in, what about room prep, paint, carpet, sound panels, and so forth?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I'm a big fan of Acoustics First. Some example of some of their product, just to cover every bit of the surface in the room, give you a quick glimpse of what it looks like when you cover the corners. The added advantage of it is that you can also stick Velcro to it.
I was going to say, so it's really good for Velcro.
Sound. Yeah, and then I've got the sound panels in the ceiling also. So those are my recommendations.
By the way, when you're cabling with that with Velcro, they make Velcro. They make these Velcro that's not Velcro in the center, but 2 strips of Velcro on either side. If you're on carpet, you can just you can push, instead of using gaff tape, you can just use this to go across it and you can get rolls of it. But we used it all the time when we have walls of something, that a carpet or whatever, we just roll our cables down it as well. And it works really well to just keep things nice and tidy. Go ahead, Bill.
Absolutely, 100%. Your point about pay attention to the room before you move in. What do you have to do? And sound, I think, is the biggest part of that. I've always had problems. My last studio in the former house was literally 4 hard plaster. It was a hard plaster cube with hardwood floors, and sound abatement was more issue for me than anything else, to the extent that I ended up with the auto poles that I still have over me right now, with sound absorbent panels over them. Literally, I've got like 6 to 10 auto poles around me to just do sound abatement in a place that I didn't want to actually go in permanently. So I think, that plan.
Go ahead, Sky.
And both Mitchell and Bill's audio sound great, and we can hear the benefit of that sound abatement. So that's great. Also, channeling, cable channeling. How do you keep all your things tidy and out of the way? And again, to Charles's point of good internet, good power. What and power sources do you have? Do you need 20 plugins? Do you need where do you plug those power battery backups into?
Yeah, I mean, the good news is that my whole studio, like literally with all the lights on and everything else, is like 600 watts. Like I mean, it's just this tiny, this tiny amount of pull of draw, and I'm always kind of amazed at how little today's studios pull. So that 2 20 amp circuits or 2 15 amp circuits is typically enough, a primary and a backup if you can get it. To have just 2 circuits, and that's just mostly, especially if you're sharing it anywhere else in your building. Now, typically, we want to know the main thing is that when I'm building a studio, that's my home studio. It has that. When I'm building the studio in a room that's 20 by 30, I would want 4 to 6 20 amp circuits. Like that's what that's how I would think through that, is 4 to 6 20 amp circuits is what I would ask for if I was going to build something out. The other thing to think about that we're not really talking about is that if you can find a way to have another room, it can be almost a closet, but a slightly, a smaller room, even if you cut off, even if you lose a little, if you say, let's 20 by 30, we're going to make it, 20 by 25, like that you could have another room that is going to be your control room, that's going to keep all of your hardware. You don't want to really have all those. That way you stop thinking about fans. Like if you have something on the other side of a wall that is everything, you're not dealing with fans, and you're also not air conditioning for your equipment. Your equipment's sitting in another room. And the key is the equipment in a smaller room means it's generating heat, but you can manage that heat in a smaller room and push that out. So you just want to think about heat dissipation as well of that process, of what it takes to, to make that work. Air conditioning, by the way, we're not putting into this $20,000 thing, but it is a thing. Like air conditioning is a thing, and you need to think about how you're going to deal with it. You can actually, if you're okay with on and off air conditioning, you can get away with a lot of things. You can buy a $500 AC unit that you just need a place to exhaust it, and it will push, you can cool the whole studio down with it, but it makes a lot of noise. And so you get it down to 64 degrees and start doing your show. And like we've had it, I had one studio set up, this is years ago, that when I hit the mute button, it turned the air conditioner on. So every time I muted the mic, it would just start cooling down the place. And as soon as I turned mute off, it would turn it off. And we had it timed so that I hit the button and it would turn it off and then open the mic. So it made it a little slower for me to react to it, but it kept it cold, and we only had to use it, and there was a little switch that you could turn on, so didn't have to do it all the time. I could just turn it on when I was running out of space. But I like it to be cold, but understand that air conditioning is a thing that you have to pay attention to.
And
go ahead, Bill.
from an engineering point of view, also put your gear, your rack, in the middle of the room, because it's horrible to have to crawl under something, or you can't get to the back of something.
Well, it's not put in the middle of the room, but to your point, it is a hefty person distance from the room. Like whatever size we are, we need to make sure that we can get between the desk and the wall relatively comfortably so that we can work. So don't have it be like a 9-year-old child distance to the wall. You want it to be a full-grown American male distance to the wall. So anyways,
with lights, so you can see the little plugs.
Yeah, and having little lights back there, but having that there, know that you're going to go back there and work. In that area. And so definitely, I wouldn't say the middle of the room, but when we carve out things, even on a remote, I carve out that space. On the other side of it is I need this space, and I make my tables look bigger than they actually are, because if you tell an event company that you want space behind your gear, they won't give it to you. But if you say your table is this big, they'll just go, okay, the table's that big. And then you come in and they're like, and then you tape it. I tape off my spaces. This is my space. Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, so when I built my studio, and this is going back, this is 15 years ago, but it's still true. There's a shot of the back wall apart from the thing, and I had 4 quad boxes put behind there. You can see the actual exterior mounted conduit that's coming. That's that horizontal line kind of in the white space of the wall. I had all my conduit done externally because I didn't want to pierce the walls to keep sound from the outside, because we weren't that far from an airport. But 4 quad boxes. From the second week I moved into this space, every one of those outlets was taken, and 4 of them were orange outlets, which means I kept clean power on those to plug in any audio things that might get a ground loop or something like that. That was one of my big wins. I was always able to do things like battery charging and stuff like that and never run out of those Edison outlets.
Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell. Oh, can't hear you, Mitchell. But your sync, it's amazing.
Bounce, sorry. The heat gain is definitely a big issue. In my room, I pretty much heat the whole place, and I have to crank up the air conditioning. And of course, anybody else in the house is like, "What's going on? It's cold down here." So I wish there were better ways of getting the heat out of the room than what I currently use.
Yeah, I will admit that I have a lot of open space right next to my office, and I'm putting a new door in just so I can, and an AC unit just for my office, just because I don't want to try to. My wife likes the space to be about 10 degrees hotter than I do, so I just figured I'd just have my little man cave and get out of that. Go ahead, Courtney.
A couple of things about stuff that Alex was talking about. If you have a lot of equipment in a rack, and you want to be able to work on it, but you don't have the room to leave 3 feet behind it, get the wheel package for it so that you can leave enough slack in the cable so that you can rotate it around, work on it, rotate it back so that you can look at the front. And another thing I warned you about, putting a switch on your air conditioner to turn it on and off whenever you open the microphone. If you short cycle the compressor in most air conditioners, it'll fry it pretty quickly. It has to stay on long enough to dissipate the heat from the compressor, and if you shut it off before it's dissipated the heat, that heat will build up and it will burn out your compressor, so don't do that.
I did it all the time. I don't know. We did use it for a couple of years. It worked just fine, but it was cheap. It wasn't an expensive, it was like a cheap AC unit. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, the whole idea of HVAC is a big deal in studios, as I think everybody knows, particularly if you're going to be using open microphones. In my thing, you'll see the ugly as sin big ducts on top, but again, we didn't want to penetrate this entire shell other than with these massive heavyweight doors so that we could keep sound on the outside. But that's a mini split unit that has the compressor side outside, and inside the air handlers in that little room where we had actually a refrigerator most of the time. So it's that blue door in the center with the light behind it. And then that was adjacent to my office. You'll also see there's a lot of funny angles in here, and that's by design. We built all the walls not square just to keep sound reflections down. It's really hard to do and it's really expensive. So you're not going to be able to do that in most things. But it's why in my case, even in the room I'm in now, my desk is kind of in a corner. So I avoid talking right at a flat wall and getting those standing waves going.
Next question.
Next question comes to us from Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And he says, what factors determine how close or far apart to space grid supports, rail pinch, vertical, horizontal, minimum, maximum recommendations? Are there any industry standards that are designed to accommodate professional gear?
Go ahead, John.
So I need some of that marriage counseling that Courtney was talking about, because I can't put any tracks or anything else in my office here because you can see it from my kitchen. So these auto poles were the godsend for me. And the desk is up against the wall, and the two auto poles go up to my ceiling, and then I put that piece of truss with Manfrotto super clamps to hold that truss, and then I can mount the lights on those truss and the camera and those two monitors. Everything mounts to that truss that goes across. This worked out really, really well.
Go ahead, Rupert.
I was going to mention this earlier in terms of things not worth skimping on. Anytime you're putting stuff above head, you don't want to cut back on that. And a lot of these industry standards out there are designed by engineers to suit the weight and the load and the supports and all that stuff. So just watch out for that.
I'm probably going to put mine at 2 feet, even though that normally what we put grids in is probably 3 feet is usually what we do as far as distance goes. I want a little bit more control and a little bit more granularity, and it doesn't cost me very much. So I'm going to go ahead and put it at a 2 foot grid. Next question.
Rupert McCray in Dallas, Texas, up next. He says, does the $20,000 project assume the room has adequate power and cooling?
Go ahead, John.
Negative. I had to run a 30 amp circuit directly to my big UPS over there, because it's got a NEMA 30 on it, and that required to run an external power just into that UPS, and then I've got another UPS on the other side, 20 amps, and then cooling. My room's got its own air unit specifically for this room.
Good, Charles.
To save them, to save money, you could find yourself a father-in-law that's an electrical engineer and sees what you're about to do and starts to rewire your entire room so that you could do whatever you need. And the power to the house is completely separate from your room. Yeah. And like Alex, I have 3 APCs, one for the monitors, one for the Blackmagic equipment, and one for the drives, and then one for everything else.
To that point, if you are going to use any bare wires with electricity, you want to hire an electrician. Do not do that yourself, ever. Like, it's a surefire way to have issues. Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, if you go with the LED lighting that I recommended, and if you're using the UM1s, those things run silently and cool. So they have a lot less power draw than traditional racks of PCs and stuff. They would these machines, and here I'm in the UK, so air conditioning is a very strange thing to have over here. We don't need in the UK. But these, I hardly draw any electricity, even with all my big lights, because of the benefit of LED and the M1 chips. So
yeah,
cool.
Rupert?
To Charles's point, I am the electrical engineer. That's the problem, but I am reassuringly expensive. So
Next question.
Roscoe Jones says, what software might you recommend students learn to best utilize this $20,000 studio?
Go ahead, Sky.
I'm going to say any spreadsheet. Start with putting it all down on a spreadsheet so you can A, keep track of it, B, account for it, and C, do the math. And so that's, you know, Google Sheets, numbers, Excel, just have a place that you can do the calculations for you.
I think as far as utilizing the actual studio, as far as calculating it, I would, I'm really excited about what I'm planning to do, because almost everything's going to be IP driven that I put into as I move this whole studio and I get all the DMX and everything else. So tying things into Isadora is something I'm pretty excited about, as far as having Isadora kind of run the system for me. So I'm pretty interested in how that looks. Otherwise, Mix Effect Pro, here to record, you know, those types of things are going to be important from that. PXB. Is it PXB? I cannot keep that in my head. It's too close to PXC. Next question.
Matt Carr in Bedford, New York is next. And he says, is your proposed grid, Alex, made out of 3/4-inch EMT? It seems lightweight for attaching magic arms to.
We're going to find out. I am planning to do it that way. The grid above so the grid above is separate from everything else going around it. So I'm going to build everything else with 3/4. I'm going to play with 3/4 and see if it's going to be able to handle the weight. And if it doesn't, I'll just get something bigger, you know, for the grid part. So I've already kind of thought through the idea that it may not be strong enough for the grid. I do think, though, you have to remember that it's not a piece of grid that is going all the way across. It's a whole network of grid that's all together. So it's a lot stronger as a group than it would be with one piece that is going all the way across. Next question.
Next one comes from Tlalek Lopez Waterman in Astoria, New York. And he says, would you add a generator to the mix in places like California?
Go ahead, Ken.
Well, here in the UK, I have solar panels and a battery wall coming. Unfortunately, it's not going to be a Tesla battery wall, because Tesla only sell the battery wall if you buy it with their solar panels. And I've had the solar panels here for a good 8-9 years now. But a battery wall can, with solar panels, and you know, you can almost be self-sufficient. So
yeah, go ahead, Rupert.
Yeah, so I mean, I have UPS that will carry the major stuff through a brownout, and then I have a kilowatt of inverter backup. But I have been looking into generators, you know, big ones that will help me run the cooling as well, you know, through an event or through an outage or through 3 days of no power like we had last year. But I actually contacted 3 different manufacturers. I won't mention them by name, but 3 of the names that you might think of, and filled in all their quote request stuff, and haven't heard back from any of them.
I think everyone's a little overwhelmed. They don't have enough stuff for the number of people who want to get it. Go ahead, Bill.
I think it entirely depends on the kind of practice you have. If you're doing a daily show and people are relying on it, you've got income coming off of advertising or something like that, and you cannot afford to be down because you lose money, then for sure you want backup things, and you want to make sure that if the power is less than stable in your area, you want to replace that. For most of us, I always thought that if a power outage of a magnitude that was going to shut down my studio with the backup, the battery backups and the things that I have came along, it would make enough news that a client would understand. And in general, in corporate production, you can always shoot next week or whatever. Things are not mission critical. So you have to assess your own risk, I think. They're really useful, but they can also be expensive.
Go ahead, Rupert.
There's an important point here in this like remote work kind of thing. You know, if you're dealing with employers or clients or companies that really would rather have you in the office or on site, and you want to be at home, then part of your value proposition is you are far better equipped at home. That means you need to have more resources than they could even think that you could have in an office. If they want you to come into an office because they've got backup power, you need backup power, probably more and for longer than they have.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Guy Cochran in Seattle, Washington says, what would you get for an NDI-based 20K studio?
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I started building out one similar to first what you were talking about with the Blackmagic based on studio cameras, and then I decided to go to the other side of the field, and just because everybody was doing the same thing, so I want to try something different. So, you know, here at home, I'm using mostly vMix and NDI. So the camera that you see behind me is one of the bird dogs, and this could be any of them, but this one does full NDI, so there's just more data. So I would probably go with 3 of those, or a camera that has 3 or that has full NDI. So I put together a quick little $20,000 thing in numbers. So I'll start at the bottom and kind of work my way back up. So a Mac Mini, and you can run NDI Studio Monitor on that. So that's just free software that you can use to do toss feeds wherever you want your multi-views and whatnot. Then a $1,000 teleprompter, that'd be the ICANN one that Tony just got. There's a Netgear switch called the M4250 that's Dante and NDI. It has presets already inside. Hyperdeck, hard drive. PC, you can get what you want. Just make sure it has an NVIDIA GPU. So I put $2,000 towards that. The monitor that you see me using in that behind the scenes was this LG 43-inch quad, which gives me 4 1920 by 1080s or 1 big 4K. The vMix software, $700. Sennheiser wireless rack mount, $600. Countryman H6, the Behringer X32, some cables, aperture light, some stands, and then the bird dogs, 3 of them with the keyboard controller, so you can move them around. $83.97, and you can have other people remotely move those around. So that's kind of one of the other advantages of that. I went over budget by $245, so you might have to take out something.
A really, really good option. Next question.
Comes from Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas. And Rupert says, should a $20,000 studio have special insurance coverage, particularly when used for business at home? And how would you value the sweat equity in your time for setup and downtime in case of disaster?
Go ahead, Charles.
Insurance, very important. That's one of the first things that I did when I started to move the studio to this location, is make sure that everything was covered, because you just never know. And it's also a business, so you have to treat it as such. It is cool that we get to talk about it, and we are very involved with this, and it's personal to us, but don't forget it's a business. As far as the sweat equity, it's your own time and you invest in yourself, so you can't insure for that as long as you are making progress and you're a little better than you were yesterday. Let's say you are less bad than you were yesterday, then you're making progress. So that's why I would equate that.
Next question. Oh, sorry, Courtney. I missed you, Courtney.
Yeah, you might want to talk to your insurance agent, find an umbrella insurance policy. That's what I have, umbrella liability policy. It'll cover your liability for both your home and your business to up to $1 million, $2 million, something like that for liability. And it might save you some money because you can apply it to your car, your home, and your business at the same time, because it covers you in all 3.
Next question.
Robert Soji in Los Angeles is up next with what parts of a $20,000 studio are least and most likely to be affected by advancements in technology?
Go ahead, Rupert.
Well, I'm about sort of $3,000 or $4,000 into this shelving system, what with all the stuff I've got, and I think that's going to keep its value.
Yeah, exactly. Go ahead, Bill.
I think anything with a wall wart is the most likely to change, because all these small electronics are developing so rapidly that today's, oh my gosh, I've got a Blackmagic 6K. Oh, I didn't have the 6K Pro. And then the next one's going to come out and it's going to have better performance circumstances. So things just aren't lasting as long as they used to, in my experience. The expensive stuff still has pretty long. Grip gear and things like that have pretty long, but the electronics are all revving so fast.
You should have to look at what you really need. I find that I don't have to upgrade that often, because I get stuff and I go, well, I can run this for 2 or 3 years, and a lot of stuff for longer before I really need to move up. But I also try to, go forward. So, for instance, for most of our production, I stopped buying 1080p solutions almost across the board in 2016. So then as people started asking for 4K, it wasn't that big of a deal. And Blackmagic made that possible because it was actually affordable to do that. Next question.
Next question comes from Tony Mobley, a regular here in Newman, Georgia. Can you guys play? You guys play really hard. Is there a quarter of that budget that can work for those who have not embraced the office hours mode, bringing the regular people along?
Go ahead, Rupert.
I think we have sort of covered those ranges of budgets in office hours before, like the 5K range, things like that. I was also looking at this just recently from, again, a work from home perspective, and the companies out there that want to help get their new staff or even present staff set up at home, and perhaps they're starting from nothing, and I've been setting, corporate folks up from home for a long time, usually computer, all the usual stuff, $5,000 worth of equipment maybe, but that's different now. So I'm looking at what's the budget that a company might need to reasonably spend to set up a new employee from home. And I don't think they could do it for a quarter of what we're talking about. I think as a minimum, you're talking about, if they have nothing, I think you're looking at 10K.
To really push it, yeah. No, we definitely build kits with smaller pieces that might only cost $3,000 to $5,000, but we're definitely moving away from switchers and gear and stuff like that. Once you start doing that, I think you do start to get into a bigger number. Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, I think that Rupert covered it. I think the by spending trying to do it with $5,000, there would be, you'd be making a lot of compromises on a lot of kit that you would then, once it was, you were generating revenue that you wouldn't use. So, investing maybe just in parts of that kit, then you can kind of do it. But it's not really a saving by trying to do it on a smaller basis.
I often think of it when you're driving through, especially Tanzania, but in a lot of places in Africa, people will build their houses as they get money. So you'll see these. I asked, like, are these just abandoned houses? They're like, no, they're still working on them. They can afford a couple more bricks this year, this week, and then next week, and then they just keep on adding them until the house is done. And the interesting thing about that is that I think about that with a studio is to build it brick by brick, in the sense that you are, I would be leaning towards I would buy, if I had $5,000, I'd get the Extreme, I'd get a Blackmagic camera, I'd get a good lens, and then I'd buy I'd buy whatever else I could, but every component would fit into that $20,000 or $30,000 budget. It would still be the components that I use. And then I just keep on adding to those components, as I can afford it. Go ahead, Sky.
Well, and in Italy, if they finish the house, then their taxation gets different. So that's why you always see rebar sticking out the top. But the question I had when I read this, Tony, was who's your audience and what do you want them to do? And if this is a hobby, then you don't need to do anything. If this is only going to need to please your mother, then you've already done that. And so the question is, and again, to Charles's point, is this a business? Then consequently, who is your audience and what do you want them to do? And what are they going to be attracted to and what's going to get in their way? And so are there civilians that want to play hard? Yeah, because they have the time to be able to do that now. They're retired. They wanted to be more creative, but they were in a 9-to-5 ecosystem that they had to, take care of their families with. So I think it's a question of who do you want to impress and why? And I know you have a very good audience that's growing, and your equipment is getting out of the way of your message. And so that's where, can we do it cheaper? Yes, but why?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Because we're cheap. That's why. And being one of those cheap people, Tony, you can absolutely get a really pretty good image for around $5,000 if you just shop the low end. If you don't go for the 6K camera, you go for the Canon M50 Mark II, you go for the $179 mixer and the $200 microphone, and the Newar $100 for 2 panel lights that are adjustable in color, temperature, and brightness. They're LEDs. They work great. So you can get by, you don't have to get the latest Mac Pro, expensive $5,000 computer. You can go for something cheaper, Mac Mini. So you can get by for $5,000. It's not going to be great. And I get by with the Mini Pro. If you're not recording everything all the time, forgo the ISO. Just get the Mini Pro because it has all the same outputs as the Extreme and can do everything the Extreme does except for the recording.
Go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, I asked the question because I'm always thinking about those people who have not embraced streaming so far, and they're way behind, and they don't understand the need to do what we're doing, and they're still caught up in what was in the past and the way in which, and they're still at this moment satisfied with opening up their laptop and just using it. And I was just wondering, is there a way to sort of bridge this $20,000 setup to those that are?
I just think it's a different conversation. like I just think that I think it's a great conversation, and I think there's another second hour that what would you do for 5,000 is another conversation. But I think that we're just playing this game today. But 5,000, 50,000, 100,000, 500, these are all things that we probably should eventually have a video on our web, on the YouTube page and everything else on all these different settings. I think that I arbitrarily, because we had already started having a conversation about a studio, I arbitrarily created the game that was 20,000. But we could definitely play another game that's 5,000. In fact, put it in the second hour, and we'll just spend the whole hour talking about 5,000 instead of 20,000. It's arbitrary, other than we set it. Yeah. Next question. We're running out of time.
Joe at Alpha Creative in Gainesville, Florida says, has anyone attempted to create a baffle system for their studio air conditioning to slow the flow's sound?
Go ahead, Charles.
Yeah, so at the old studio before the pandemic, we actually had 3 suites and then 2 rooms for clients and yada yada. So we had a 3-day weekend where we put a mic and a temperature gauge in each room. We went to the compressor room. We turned the RPMs as low as possible. And then we measured out throughout the whole weekend, and then going into the ducts and making little cardboard things to shift the flow. And it actually brought down the sound, and it evened out the temperature throughout the whole rooms. But it took us some time to actually figure that out. But the sound just came from lowering the RPMs on the main fan.
Yeah, this is a great example of amps versus volts. so you know of basically, you know, a big fan not moving very fast can move a lot of air through something, as opposed to a small fan that's working really hard. Go ahead, Bill.
I take the lesson from the voice booths that I have owned over the years. They use a system because the mics are so sensitive, and because you're trying to stop all outside noise or any exterior noise from getting into the mics. They usually have something on the back wall that people don't see that are boxes, and they are very much little warrens of leaves that come in that allow the air to move through and not go direct, so that it slows the velocity, and it also abates the noise of those. And so I just take my lesson from those, and anytime I've had to do a room or anything else, did the same kind of thing. When I built the studio, we built a massive version of the same thing.
Somehow the question got pushed forward before we got to the last person. I don't know who is. Go ahead, Rupert.
With central air systems, you do need to be a little bit careful. If you go around baffling the system or slowing down the fans, you sometimes will stop getting enough airflow over the evaporator coils, and they'll freeze up because the compressor outside is still running at 1 speed. So you just need to be a little careful. If you're in a commercial facility, please speak to your facilities managers, because if you go doing something and it unbalances the system, it's going to just have a ripple effect. Here in just my room here, though, the air vent, I find the noise is actually generated by the vent. It's the air hitting the vent. If I take the vent off and just have a free open duct, nice free open quiet airflow.
Interesting. Next question.
Tyler Roberts in Chambersburg says, what lights are suggested for lighting a back wall or backdrop? Is a pavo tube a good solution, or are there better options?
Go ahead, Ken.
The problem with the tube is that it throws light everywhere. You want a light, ideally a panel with a barn doors, so that it only throws it behind you, so that you can get that color. That's the main issue with a tube rather than a flat panel with barn doors.
Yeah, and there's lots of little things. Like I'm going to be when you see mine, you're going to see me experimenting with lots of ideas, because I don't know what part of it is in an HDR. I think that I don't know what Rupert. What are you using on yours?
What was the question?
Lights, backgrounds. What are you using on your background lights?
They are just DMX LED, effectively park hands.
Yep. And then you've got a guy. What's that light?
Mix panel 150, and it's got the barn doors light. Yeah, so I can block the light and throw it where I want.
Next question. We're kind of cutting through them.
Yeah, next one coming up from Sky in Seattle. Alex, how do you control your DMX lights?
I am going to be using, for almost all of it, I'll be using the Isadora along with a DMX King. You could use an NTEC as well. So NTEC or DMX, and so that's going to convert the IP controls to DMX. And so so that way I can run everything from Isadora. And again, I'm kind of getting my head, now that my head's slowly getting around Isadora, I'm going to probably be doing most things with that. So
and the physical cables, what is the box that you plug things into?
it's literally a one little box. It's not within arm's reach right now, but one little box with XLR. In my case, three pin out, and then I've got some converters for some of the cameras to go to 5-pin. So, next question.
Next one comes from Garrick Parmalee in Columbia, Missouri. What would you implement in your studio to make it easy for muggles to use?
Go ahead, Rupert.
I think I'd go to the DVE store and buy one of their one-button studios.
Very good, very good. Yeah. So the thing is that you start to really work with. We try not to call them muggles, but we do call them civilians a lot. So when we provide civilians with controls, we custom build those. So a lot of times in studios that we've built in the past, and it's actually not as expensive as you would think. I don't think I have any really good pictures of them, but we'll build a control that's run into, now in the past, what we've done is used Arduino controllers for them, but they run the switcher and they might activate other things, but everything's all built into it. And we can have those machined. There's companies that will machine them, but we literally give them little designs. I want a button that looks like a computer. I want a button that looks like a person. I want a button and you push the button and it does the thing. So that literally it's not a Stream Deck. It's not a Studio Technologies. It's big metal buttons that literally are engraved with the thing that it does. And we put those into studios and it's night and day. Like people get confused about what button they're pushing. They don't read it. They don't whatever. For whatever reason, we put these buttons in that we built and we would machine these little pieces. We'd have a company machine them. We didn't do it. And drop those in and then those run the brain and you just tap on what you want. And for a self-run studio where you have, in our case, you had to cut between a computer, a telestrator, and possibly 3 other cameras and, a couple other things, 6 buttons there that just did the thing, and it really solidifies a lot for people. Go ahead, Rupert. Did I already go to you? Okay. Yeah. Next question.
James Hutchinson in Dublin, Ireland says, Guy, in that setup, what computer are you using to run vMix?
Can't hear you, Guy.
The computer that I'm using is a gaming laptop that's by Razer. It looks like, actually, here's the one-button studio. That's the camera, lights, computer all in one that Rupert just talked about. I'll put a link. That's for muggles. If you want to go crazy, here's the laptop that I'm using. It's just the base model of the gaming laptops. You can go up and up and up as far as RAM and cores and all that stuff. But this one does have the 8 gigabyte NVIDIA card, and that's crucial for vMix. So $20.99, and then I'd probably spend, like on mine, I spent the $200 and self-installed another 16 gigs of RAM. So I brought mine up to 32. So you will want to punch it up just a tad bit.
Next question. Last
Douglas
2 questions.
Carmichael. Yeah, we're getting close here. Douglas Carmichael said the audio networking platform I use, Wave SoundGrid, does not support M1 Macs yet. I currently own a 2013 6-core Mac Pro and am hitting CPU issues with complex tracks. Is it worth it to buy an M1 Mac now?
Go ahead, Charles.
So due to the growing pains that a lot of us are actually going through, I'm going through the same thing with Adobe. And unfortunately, you're in that gray zone where a lot of people that did not move ahead as Apple was intending, hey, we're going to be going to this platform, and they didn't listen. They're sort of trying to catch up. And even people like Adobe that say they did are still having issues in the new Macs. So just keep checking in. If you can't afford a Mac Mini to test out and see what other platforms you can use that will solve the issue in the interim, you could do that. But it's gonna be some time before everything starts working properly.
That people often wonder why Apple continues to build their own products. Final Cut and Motion and Logic and so on and so forth. It's one of the uses of that, beyond other uses that they have, is that it puts a little pressure on everyone. Like, well, if you don't keep up, there is an app that always works, with the new system, and so people you'll lose market share if you don't keep up. And I think that's been useful for Apple as far as that process goes, because we see surges every single time of more users on something that's native than non-native when they make these changes. Next question.
Mitchell Hill in Wilmington, Delaware has our last question in the regular queue. Would you build for 4K or stay with 1080 on your ATEM Mini Extreme?
I would, at $20,000, I would probably stick with 1080p. Like, I would decide I don't have the budget to move everything to 4K right now. That's probably my 2 cents on it. I think that you need more budget to decide you want to do 4K across the board. All right, that was a fun discussion. So well done for the panel or producers. Well done for all the questions and driving the conversation. Great conversation the first hour. Great conversation second hour. And thank you to the panelists for yet again contributing so much knowledge back to the group. So I appreciate your contribution. All right. Tomorrow we have 2 hours of Q&A. So if we haven't been answering your questions or we haven't gotten to your questions, tomorrow is the day to do it. So we can get caught up there. So stay tuned for that. All right, jumping into after hours.